In the small verdant village of Iziyama, nestled among the rolling hills and thick forests of West Africa, the air was alive with the whispers of the old and the reverberations of ancestral drums. The villagers lived by the traditions laid down by their forefathers, and any deviation from these customs was considered an affront to the spirits that protected them. On the eve of the annual harvest festival, a time when the village was vibrant with the colors of celebration and the joyous laughter of reunions, a young man named Obinna found himself entwined in the throes of youthful rebellion and sorrow. His father, a respected elder in the community, had recently passed away, leaving Obinna to grapple with the weight of his legacy and the expectations of his people. Obinna, tall and wiry, with eyes as deep as the forest ponds and a smile that seldom surfaced, was not known for his adherence to tradition. Where others saw sacredness, he saw superstition. Where others saw guidance, he saw control. His father's death had only deepened his resentment towards the village customs, particularly towards the sacred burial rites that he deemed unnecessarily elaborate and restrictive. The night before the festival, as the moon cast its silvery glow over the village, Obinna made his way to the local palm wine bar. The air inside was thick with the scent of fermented sap and the sound of heated debates over games of draughts. Obinna sat in the corner, nursing his drink, his mind a whirlpool of bitterness and defiance. As the night grew older and the bar emptied, leaving only the diehards and the hopelessly drunk, Obinna found himself in the company of Namdi, his father's old friend. Namdi, with his graying hair and eyes that seemed to have seen too much, had always been kind to Obinna, but tonight, his words were laced with caution. "You carry your father's fire, Obinna," Namdi said, his voice low and serious. "But beware, the spirits are watching. They do not take kindly to disrespect, especially now." Obinna scoffed, his heart hardening. "The spirits can watch all they want. What have they done for me? What have they done for any of us, except keep us tethered to the past?" Namdi shook his head, sadness etching his features. "It is not for us to question the ways of the spirits. We honor them because they are the bridge to our ancestors, to those who came before and those who will come after." But Obinna was not to be swayed. Driven by a mix of grief and alcohol-fueled courage, he made a decision that would change the course of his life. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the earthen floor. "I'll show you how much the spirits protect us," he declared, staggering slightly as he headed for the door. Namdi tried to stop him, but Obinna shrugged off his hand and disappeared into the night. He walked through the village, his steps unsteady but determined, until he reached the village cemetery. The air was cooler here, the silence more profound, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant sound of festival drums. In the middle of the cemetery stood the freshly covered grave of his father, marked by a simple wooden cross and surrounded by offerings from the villagers. It was a sacred site, a place of mourning and respect. But Obinna, fueled by defiance and sorrow, did the unthinkable. He relieved himself on the grave, an act so taboo that even the most hardened sinners in the village would not dare contemplate it. As the last drops fell, a chill wind swept through the cemetery, and the ground beneath Obinna trembled. The moon, as if in anger, hid behind a cloud, casting the cemetery into darkness. Obinna, suddenly sobered by fear, felt a cold dread creep into his heart. "You won't believe what happened to him after he urinated on the grave," would soon be whispered in the village, as Obinna staggered back, his heart pounding, his mind racing with the realization that he had awakened something ancient and vengeful. The curse of the ancestors had been stirred, and Obinna's life was about to change forever. The night air grew unnaturally still in the wake of Obinna's reckless act. The darkness seemed to thicken, absorbing the faint light of the stars as if the heavens themselves turned away in disgust. Obinna's heart raced as he realized the enormity of his transgression against the sacred laws of Iziyama. His breaths came in short, sharp gasps, each one a silent plea for mercy that he knew would not be granted. As he hastened away from the cemetery, the sounds of the village festivities, once a distant symphony of joy, now seemed to mock his precipitous descent into forbidden territory. Every rustle in the grass, every whisper of the wind spoke of coming retribution. Obinna could not shake the feeling of unseen eyes watching, waiting, as ancient as the land itself. When he arrived home, his mother, Adaobi, was still awake, her face illuminated by the flickering light of a kerosene lamp. She was a woman of strong faith and stronger will, her features etched with the wisdom of the ancestors and the burdens of modern life. Seeing her son's pale face and disheveled appearance, her expression shifted from concern to alarm. "Obinna, what has happened? "You look as if you have seen a ghost," she said, her voice thick with worry. Obinna, shaking, could hardly speak the words, but his guilt and fear forced them out. "Mama, I have done something terrible." He confessed his deed in a halting whisper, each word a betrayal of his father's memory and the traditions he had been taught to uphold. Adeabi's face drained of color. She grasped her chest, her breath hitching as if struck by a physical blow. "Oh, Obinna, what have you done?" she moaned, her voice a mixture of sorrow and fear. "You have defiled the sacred ground, provoked the spirits of our ancestors. This is a grave sin." Her words were like daggers to Obinna's heart, each one confirming the dread that had taken root within him. He watched, helpless, as his mother sank onto a wooden stool, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We must seek the wisdom of the village shaman," Adeabi declared after a moment of heavy silence. "Only he can intercede with the ancestors on your behalf, and possibly appease the spirits you have angered." Before dawn, as the first light crept timidly over the horizon, Obinna and his mother made their way to the hut of the village shaman, a revered figure known as Matsiai Kenna. The path to his dwelling was a labyrinth of winding trails and overhanging branches, which seemed to close in around them as they walked, as though nature itself disapproved of Obinna's presence. Matsiai Kenna was already waiting for them, seated outside his hut beneath a canopy of ancient trees. His eyes, reflecting decades of knowledge and the secrets of spiritual realms, fixed upon Obinna with an intensity that made the young man falter in his steps. "You have stirred the shadows that lay dormant, young Obinna," the shaman spoke, his voice echoing with the weight of unseen forces. "Your actions have unbalanced the scales that keep our world and the spirit world in harmony." Obinna's knees buckled, and he would have fallen if not for his mother's steadying hand. "Is there a way to undo what I have done?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Matsiai Kenna looked skyward, his features tightening as he sought the counsel of the ancestors. After a long pause, he lowered his gaze back to Obinna, his next words carrying a dire warning. "There is a path to redemption, but it is fraught with peril. You must undertake a journey to the sacred mountain of forgiveness. There, at the peak, you will find the shrine of atonement. Only by performing the rites of purification under the full moon can you hope to appease the angered spirits." Adeabi gasped, aware of the dangers that lay ahead, but Obinna, his resolve hardening, nodded. "I will do whatever it takes," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. As they prepared to leave, Matsiai Kenna handed Obinna a small, intricately carved talisman. "This will protect you on your journey, but remember, the spirits will be watching. You must not falter." With his mother's tearful blessing and the weight of his ancestors' eyes upon him, Obinna set out at dawn, heading towards the mountain that now seemed like the only path to salvation, not only for him but for his entire lineage. The journey would be treacherous, the outcome uncertain, but the weight of his guilt urged him on, deeper into the heart of the ancient lands governed by gods and spirits long whispered about in the tales of old. As Obinna embarked on his quest for redemption, the world around him seemed to pulsate with an ancient, rhythmic energy, a reminder of the deeply rooted spirituality of his people and the land itself. The journey to the mountain of forgiveness was fraught with challenges, both natural and supernatural, reflecting the inner turmoil that plagued his soul. The path wound through dense forests where the trees stood like sentinels, their branches weaving a tapestry of shadows and whispers. Obinna's footsteps were cautious, his senses heightened to the rustling leaves and the eerie silence that sometimes fell like a cloak, smothering all other sounds. He clutched the talisman tightly, feeling its intricate carvings biting into his palm, a constant reminder of the shaman's warning and the thin thread upon which his fate now balanced. As the sun climbed higher, its rays pierced the canopy, casting fragmented light that danced across Obinna's path. He could feel the weight of the spiritual world bearing down upon him, the eyes of the ancestors scrutinizing each step he took. The forest seemed to be testing him, branches pulling at his clothes like the fingers of spirits reluctant to let him pass, roots rising up to trip him, as if challenging his resolve. On the third day, as he reached the edge of a vast savanna, the landscape shifted dramatically. The forest receded behind him, giving way to a sprawling grassland dotted with baobab and acacia trees, their forms twisted artistically against the sky. Here, the challenges were different. The open space made him feel exposed, vulnerable to the scrutinizing gaze of both the physical and spiritual realms. Obinna's journey across the savanna was marked by encounters with wildlife that seemed to possess an uncanny awareness of his quest. A majestic lion crossed his path one dusk, stopping to lock eyes with him in a moment that felt like an eternity. The lion, a creature revered in Izayama as a guardian of sacred places, eventually turned away, its dismissal a silent command for Obina to proceed with respect and humility. The nights were a trial of their own. Obina would often hear the distant drums of tribal ceremonies, their beats syncing with the throbbing of his own heart. The fire he kept was both a source of comfort and a beacon for the spirits he had angered. Shadows danced around the fringes of his campsite, never encroaching too close but always reminding him of the watchful eyes of the ancestors. It was on the 7th night, with the mountain finally looming ahead, that Obina encountered the spirit woman. She appeared at his fireside as suddenly as a flicker of flame, her form translucent and shimmering with an ethereal light. Her presence was calming, a stark contrast to the harshness of his journey. "You are far from home, young one," she spoke, her voice the rustle of dry leaves. "What seeks you in the heart of the ancestors' domain?" Obina, though startled, felt an innate trust towards the spirit. "I seek forgiveness for my trespasses, wise one," he replied, his voice steady though his heart was not. The spirit woman nodded, her form blurring slightly with the movement. "To seek forgiveness, one must understand the depth of their transgressions. Do you understand, Obina, the balance you have disturbed?" Her question struck deep, forcing Obina to confront the magnitude of his actions. "I am beginning to," he admitted. "I see now the harmony I disrupted, the respect I discarded." "Understanding is the first step towards atonement," the spirit said, her voice fading like a dying breeze. "Proceed with this knowledge, and let each step towards the mountain be a step towards restoring what was broken." With those final words, she vanished, leaving Obina alone once more with the crackling fire and his thoughts. The encounter left him with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of his journey's spiritual implications. As dawn broke the next morning, Obina packed up his sparse camp and set his sights on the towering peak of the Mountain of Forgiveness. The climb would be arduous, the path fraught with both physical and spiritual perils, but his resolve was now fortified by the spirit's words and the understanding that his journey was about much more than personal redemption. It was about restoring the spiritual equilibrium his actions had disturbed. The sun was barely kissing the horizon, casting long shadows over the savanna as Obina approached the base of the Mountain of Forgiveness. The mountain stood as a solitary sentinel against the sky, its peak shrouded in mists that seemed to whisper secrets of the old and the timeless. Today, its daunting presence was a stark reminder of the arduous climb that awaited him. With every step forward, Obina felt the mountain's ancient energy pulsating through the ground, as if the very earth were alive with the spirits of those who had trodden this path before him. The climb was steep, the rocky terrain offering little purchase, and each step required a careful balance of physical exertion and spiritual contemplation. As he ascended, the air grew thinner and the vegetation changed. Lush grasslands gave way to hardy mountain scrub, and towering trees were replaced by wind-sculpted bushes that clung desperately to the rocky soil. The wind here spoke in hushed tones, carrying with it the cold bite of altitude and the echoes of ancestral voices that seemed both to encourage and warn him. Halfway up the mountain, Obina encountered a clearing that seemed deliberately placed as a test of his resolve. In the center stood a large, weathered rock, upon which were inscribed ancient symbols, markings left by the shaman of old, chronicling the stories of those who had come before and failed or succeeded in their quests for forgiveness. Obina approached the rock with reverence, tracing the symbols with his fingertips. Each symbol told a story of redemption, of lives mended through courage and humility, and of the severe consequences for those who faltered. The weight of his own potential fate pressed heavily upon him, and he felt a moment of doubt creep into his heart. As if summoned by his faltering conviction, a great eagle appeared overhead, its massive wings beating against the wind with powerful, assured strokes. In many African tales, the eagle was a symbol of spiritual strength and divine intervention. Obina watched as the eagle circled above, its piercing cry slicing through the mountain air, reigniting his resolve. "I cannot fail," Obina whispered to himself, his voice carried away by the wind. "I must restore what I have broken." Reinvigorated, Obina continued his ascent, each step more determined than the last. The path became even steeper, the obstacles more challenging as if the mountain itself demanded proof of his worthiness. Large boulders obstructed his way, forcing him to use both strength and strategy to navigate forward. The wind grew colder, biting through his clothing and chilling his skin, but his spirit remained ignited by the eagle's call. As night began to fall, Obina found a small cave nestled against the mountain's face, providing a minimal shelter from the relentless wind. Here, he gathered a small pile of dry brushwood and lit a fire, the flames casting a warm glow against the cold stone. The firelight flickered across cave paintings that adorned the walls, ancient art depicting the journey of other souls who had sought atonement, a silent testament to the sacredness of his undertaking. That night, as he huddled by the fire, Obinna reflected on his journey. Each step had been a lesson, each challenge a mirror reflecting his inner struggles. He realized that the path to forgiveness was not just about reaching the peak or performing the ritual. It was about the transformation that occurred within, the shedding of past grievances, and the acceptance of spiritual guidance. With the dawn, Obinna would face the final leg of his climb to the Shrine of Atonement. The peak was close now, the air filled with a palpable energy that seemed to buzz with anticipation. Obinna slept fitfully, his dreams a tapestry of shadows and light, fear and hope, woven by the spirits watching over him. As the first light of morning seeped into the cave, Obinna awoke with a clear mind and a fortified spirit. Today, he would complete his ascent, confront the spirits with humility and courage, and seek the redemption that would heal both his soul and the fabric of his community. The mountain awaited, silent and imposing, ready to witness either his restoration or his ruin. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Obinna stepped out of the cave, refreshed by a night of transformative dreams. Today, he would reach the summit of the Mountain of Forgiveness, where the spirits of his ancestors awaited to judge his worthiness. The air was crisp, filled with a silent expectancy, as if the mountain itself held its breath in anticipation of his final ascent. Clad in a light tunic that fluttered against the cold mountain wind, Obinna began his climb. The path now was more treacherous than anything he had faced before. Jagged rocks jutted out like the bones of the earth, and narrow ledges offered precarious footholds. Above him, the peak of the mountain pierced the sky, veiled occasionally by drifting clouds that seemed to cleanse the air with their passing. As he climbed, Obinna's mind turned over the lessons he had learned from the spirits and the land. Each step was a meditation, his heartbeat a drumline syncing with the ancient pulse of the earth. The wind whispered through the crevices, carrying voices that were both strange and familiar, urging him onward. Midway through the morning, Obinna encountered a steep incline that led directly to the summit. Here, the mountain revealed its final challenge, a sheer cliff face, slick with the mist that the clouds had left behind. Clinging to the sparse vegetation, Obinna slowly made his way up, his fingers grasping at the cold, wet stone, his feet searching for invisible holds. As he neared the top, a sudden gust of wind swept across the cliff, threatening to dislodge him. Obinna pressed himself against the rock, his heart pounding, and in that moment of stillness, he felt a profound connection to his ancestors. It was as if they were there with him, their hands upon his back, steadying him against the forces that sought to pull him down. With a deep breath, Obinna pushed himself up and over the ledge, pulling himself onto the summit of the Mountain of Forgiveness. The view from the top was breathtaking. Below him, the world stretched out in an expansive tapestry of green and brown, rivers winding through the landscape like silver threads. Above, the sky was a vast dome, clear and impossibly blue. At the center of the summit stood the Shrine of Atonement, a simple structure made of stone and thatch, ancient and worn but still strong against the elements. Obinna approached with reverence, his heart filled with a mix of awe and fear. This was the heart of his journey, the sacred space where he would face the spirits and seek their forgiveness. The interior of the shrine was dim, lit only by the light that filtered through the gaps in the thatch. Obinna could feel the presence of the spirits immediately, a weighty silence that filled the space. In the center of the room, a small altar held various offerings from those who had come before him. Small figurines, beads, and bowls of herbs and earth. Obinna knelt before the altar, placing the talisman that Matsi Ikena had given him among the offerings. He then took from his pouch a handful of red earth he had collected from his father's grave, the very place where his journey of folly and redemption had begun. With his head bowed, Obinna began to speak, his voice steady and clear. Ancestors of Izayama, spirits of the land, I come before you a humble and repentant man. I have walked the path of recklessness and have felt the pain of my transgressions. Today, I offer this earth as a symbol of my connection to you and to the land that sustains us all. He spread the red earth around the altar, his hands trembling slightly. I seek your forgiveness, not just for my own peace but for the harmony of our village, for the respect that is due to you and to all our forebears. As he spoke, the air within the shrine seemed to shift, growing warmer, the oppressive silence melting away as if his words were a balm to the wounded spirits. A light breeze stirred inside the shrine, touching Obinna's face like a soft affirmation. When he finished his plea, Obina remained kneeling, his head bowed, waiting for a sign of acceptance or rejection. The moments stretched, each second a pulse of hope and fear. Then softly, almost imperceptibly, a sound filled the shrine, the distant beat of drums, like those he had heard in his dreams, rhythmic and soothing. Feeling tears well up in his eyes, Obina knew that his plea had been heard, and the spirits had granted him their forgiveness. He stayed there for a long while, basking in the peace of the shrine, before finally rising. His heart was lighter now, as if the weight of his guilt had been lifted and carried away by the wind that danced around the summit. Obina's journey down the mountain would be a journey of rebirth, the return of a man forgiven and renewed, ready to restore and enrich the life of his village with the wisdom of his experience. As he descended, the mountain seemed to approve, the earth firm and welcoming beneath his feet, the sky open and bright above him. The spirits had not only forgiven Obina, they had restored him to his community, a testament to the enduring power of respect, repentance, and reconciliation. After his profound experience at the Shrine of Atonement, Obina began his descent from the mountain of forgiveness with a new lightness in his spirit. Each step down the rugged path was a step closer to his village, his family, and a future he was now eager to reclaim and rebuild. The mountain behind him stood as a silent guardian, its peak a reminder of the spiritual journey and the transformation that had unfolded within him. As he approached the village, the familiar sights and sounds of Izayama welcomed him. The air was filled with the scent of cooking fires and the earthy aroma of the forest after rain. Children played in the dusty paths, their laughter a melody that seemed sweeter to Obina's ears than ever before. Women carried water from the stream, their pots balanced gracefully on their heads, and men returned from the fields, their tools slung over their shoulders, all part of the daily rhythm of village life that Obina had once taken for granted. His return did not go unnoticed. Word of his approach spread quickly, and soon a crowd gathered, curious to see the man who had dared defy the spirits and then sought their forgiveness on the sacred mountain. Obina's mother, Adaobi, was the first to reach him, her eyes brimming with tears, not of sorrow but of relief and joy. "Obina, my son, you have returned to us," she exclaimed, embracing him tightly. The touch of his mother, warm and real, grounded him, and in her embrace, Obina felt the last of his old resentments and pain dissolve. "I have returned, Mama, changed and hopeful," Obina replied, his voice strong and clear. His gaze then turned to the gathering crowd, seeing faces marked with skepticism but also with hope and curiosity. Obina addressed them all, his voice carrying over the crowd, infused with a conviction of his newfound wisdom. "My people of Izayama, I stood before the spirits, our ancestors, and sought their forgiveness for my transgressions. They have granted me their blessing, not just for my sake but for all of us, that we might remember the importance of respect and tradition in binding our community together." His words stirred the crowd, and murmurs of surprise and contemplation rippled through them. Matsi Ikena, the village shaman, stepped forward, his presence commanding silence. "Obina has walked a path few would dare to tread," Matsi Ikena announced. "His journey to the Shrine of Atonement was one of great peril, yet he has returned to us with the blessings of the ancestors. Let his experience remind us all of the powers that watch over us and of the courage it takes to admit one's faults and seek to make amends." The shaman's endorsement meant a great deal to the villagers, and slowly, the crowd began to show signs of acceptance and forgiveness, their faces softening, their bodies relaxing as they listened. The next day, Obina joined the elders in a council meeting, where he shared the full story of his ascent and what he had learned from the spirits and the land. His narrative was met with nods of understanding and respect. It was decided that Obina would work alongside Matsi Ikena to learn the ways of the shaman, to serve as a bridge between the old and the young within the village. In the weeks that followed, Obina dedicated himself to his new role with a passion that inspired those around him. He helped to revitalize traditions that had been waning, integrating them with new ideas that encouraged the younger villagers to participate and take pride in their heritage. As the seasons changed, so too did the life of the village, infused with a renewed spirit of unity and respect for the traditions that had sustained them. Obina's journey became a story told and retold, a testament to the power of redemption and the unbreakable bond between the people and their ancestors. The festival of the harvest that year was the most vibrant Izayama had seen in years. Drums beat with the heart of the village, dancers moved with the grace of the wind, and Obina, once a rebellious son, now danced among them, a leader reborn, his every step a drumbeat of hope and renewal for the future of Izayama. The Festival of Shadows was an ancient tradition in Izayama, held once every decade, a celebration that marked the cyclical nature of life and death, honoring both the visible and invisible forces that shaped their lives. This year, the festival held a deeper significance for the villagers, for it was the first since Obina's return and transformation. The festival was not only a celebration but also a collective rite of purification and renewal, embodying the lessons of humility and respect that Obina's journey had reinforced. As preparations began, Obina worked closely with Matsi Ikena, learning the sacred rituals that would call upon the ancestors to join in the celebration. These rituals were complex, involving the creation of masks and the brewing of traditional libations, each step imbued with symbolic meaning passed down through generations. The village buzzed with activity. Men and women, young and old, contributed to the preparations. The women weaved intricate patterns into cloth and baskets, while the men gathered wood for the great bonfire that would illuminate the night. Children practiced songs and dances, their laughter and voices blending into the lively hum of a community united. On the eve of the festival, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of deep purple and gold, the entire village gathered in the central square. A great circle was formed, at the center of which stood the bonfire, its flames reaching skyward, crackling with energy and anticipation. Obina, adorned in a robe of vibrant colors and a mask carved from the wood of the sacred baobab tree, stepped into the center of the circle. The mask represented the spirit of the eagle, a totem of protection and vision, its features painted with symbols that told the story of his journey and redemption. As the drums began to beat, slow and deliberate, Obina raised his arms towards the sky, invoking the spirits of the ancestors. Matsi Ikena joined him, his own mask depicting the wise tortoise, a symbol of longevity and wisdom. Together, they chanted the ancient verses, their voices strong and clear, calling to the spirits to witness their unity and strength. The firelight flickered across the faces of the villagers, casting long shadows that danced along with the rhythm of the drums. As the ceremony progressed, the villagers joined in, each donning their own masks, transforming into the various spirits and animals that represented their clan's heritage and stories. The square became a swirling tapestry of colors, sounds, and movements, a living embodiment of the village's rich cultural history and spiritual beliefs. Later in the night, as the energy of the dance and chants reached a crescendo, Obina led the village in a silent procession to the nearby river. Here, under the light of a full moon, they offered the libations to the water, sending flowers and small lanterns downstream. The river, a vital source of life for the village, reflected the moonlight and the flickering lights of the lanterns, carrying their prayers and offerings to the spirits. This act of offering was a gesture of thanks and a plea for continued guidance and protection from the ancestors. It symbolized the flow of life, the enduring link between the past, present, and future generations of Izayama. As the procession returned to the village, a gentle breeze swept across the land, rustling through the leaves and grass, whispering like the voices of ancestors long gone but never forgotten. It was a sign, the elders said, of the ancestors' blessings, their approval of the village's homage. The Festival of Shadows ended as dawn broke, its first light mingling with the dying embers of the bonfire. Exhausted yet uplifted, the villagers dispersed to their homes, the bonds between them strengthened, their cultural identity reaffirmed. Obina, standing beside the smoldering ashes of the bonfire, felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. Izayama had embraced its past, celebrated its present, and looked forward to the future with hope and pride. Through the festival, Obina had not only woven himself back into the fabric of his village but had also helped to stitch together the old and the new, ensuring that the traditions of Izayama would endure and thrive in the hearts of its people for generations to come. As the dawn of a new day bathed Izayama in golden light, the village slowly awoke from the revelry of the Festival of Shadows. The air still hummed with the echoes of drums and chants, a resonant reminder of the night's unity and celebration. Families emerged from their homes, sharing stories of the festival, each recounting their favorite moments and the deep sense of connection they felt. For Obina, watching his village come alive with such vibrant energy, the festival was not only a conclusion but a beginning, a launching point into a future where tradition and progress walked hand in hand. The months that followed saw Obina taking on an increasingly pivotal role in the community. Under Matsi Ikena's guidance, he deepened his knowledge of the spiritual and cultural practices of Izayama, becoming a bridge between the elder wisdom and the youthful vibrancy of the village. His journey to the Mountain of Forgiveness had transformed him into a symbol of hope and renewal, his story a testament to the power of redemption and the importance of maintaining a harmonious balance with the ancestral spirits. One crisp morning, as the harmattan wind whispered through the trees, bringing with it the dry scent of the savannah, the village council convened to discuss the future of Izayama. With the recent revival of cultural pride spurred by the festival, there was a collective desire to embrace the future without forsaking the past. Obinna, invited to speak, stood before the council, his presence commanding yet humble. Elders, brothers and sisters, Obinna began, his voice carrying the weight of his experiences. We have seen the strength that comes from honoring our traditions and the spirits of our ancestors. Yet, we also stand on the brink of a new era, an era where the outside world makes its presence felt more each day. We must find a way to embrace the opportunities that change brings without losing the essence of who we are. He proposed initiatives that would enable Iziyama to interact with the broader world. These included partnerships with nearby villages to create a cultural exchange program and the introduction of educational initiatives that would provide the village youth with knowledge of both their heritage and the modern world. He spoke of sustainable practices that could enhance their agricultural output without harming the land that was so deeply revered in their culture. The council listened, intrigued and inspired by Obinna's vision. Discussions that followed were animated and thoughtful, with elders and youth alike contributing ideas that bridged the gap between tradition and modernity. It was a testament to the village's resilience and willingness to adapt, qualities that Obinna had come to embody. As the meeting drew to a close, Matsui Kenna stood, his eyes reflecting pride and approval. Today, we have laid the groundwork for a future that honors our past while looking forward, he declared. It is through the courage and wisdom of individuals like Obinna that we find our path forward, guided by the light of our ancestors. In the weeks that followed, Obinna worked tirelessly, his days filled with teaching, learning, and planning. He helped to set up workshops where elders taught the youth traditional crafts and where the youth, in turn, introduced the elders to new technologies and ideas. These workshops quickly became a core part of village life, a place where generations met and wove their knowledge together, creating a vibrant tapestry of culture and innovation. The season turned, and with it came the harvest. It was bountiful, reflecting the health and happiness of the village. As the villagers gathered to celebrate their success, Obinna stood among them, no longer the wayward son, but a leader whose strength had been forged in the depths of remorse and the heights of redemption. Under the starlit sky, as another festival took shape, Obinna looked out over his home, his heart full. Iziyama was a place changed yet unchanged, where the shadows of the past met the light of the future, dancing together in the harmony that Obinna had once dared to disrupt but had now helped to restore. In the soft glow of the festival fires, with the drums beating a rhythm of continuity and promise, Obinna realized that his journey was not just his own, but a part of a larger story, a story of a village that had learned to bend like the baobab tree, rooted in strength, yet flexible in the winds of change.